Well, Jake Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts.
Today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
So here's what went down. This is the moment critics have been waiting for all these years, and honestly, it's way bigger than anyone saw coming. We're witnessing the collapse, the complete unraveling that everyone knew was inevitable, but nobody could have predicted the sheer scale of devastation when everything finally imploded right after Jake Paul got absolutely demolished by Anthony Joshua on December 19, 2025. Something wild started unfolding. Federal agencies kicked into high gear, like seriously moving fast. We're seeing arrests, massive FBI operations, heavy allegations emerging that the Paul brothers actually tried to run from the country while this avalanche of evidence built up around widespread fraud and fixed fights that supposedly broke federal gambling regulations. Just think about that for a moment. What began as internet theories, those hushed conversations bouncing through Reddit threads and viral TikTok episodes that most dismissed as online garbage, had blown up into a legitimate federal probe with actual criminal implications. And right now, as more details keep dropping and fresh intel surfaces, one fact stands out above everything else. Absolutely undeniable. The Jake Paul chapter, this whole era of fake boxing entertainment and handpicked to nobodies, is completely finished.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you noticed he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. You know, I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. Yeah, like there was a point where, you know, I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, you know, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that like violence war thing between us, like after he slapped me, I wanted to, you know, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
But let's take a step back here, because this whole mess didn't start with federal raids and criminal investigations. We need to rewind to when people weren't talking about arrest warrants and government probes and serious legal consequences. We need to go back to when the skepticism was just whispers in the background, just casual talk. We're talking about internet conspiracies, regular fans noticing strange things in Paul's fights, wondering if something seemed off, if the puzzle pieces weren't fitting together quite right 5 years ago. If you said Jake Paul's boxing matches were scripted, that they were predetermined outcomes designed for entertainment rather than competition, you got called a conspiracy theorist, basically mocked and dismissed. 6 months ago, you became part of a growing movement, part of this wave of people connecting dots and identifying patterns that couldn't be ignored anymore. Today, right now, you're completely vindicated, proven right in the most incredible way possible. The suspicion started small, almost innocent, really. Fans noticed inconsistency, little things that seemed fishy, opponents that seemed too cooperative during fights, odd referee signals that made no tactical sense, final round actions that looked rehearsed rather than spontaneous, but it remained deniable, always explainable with convenient reasoning. Bad luck, former champions past their prime, internet drama manufactured for clicks and attention. But then that leaked Tyson fight script emerged and everything shifted completely.
Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson was 100% scripted. Mike Tyson repeatedly bit his boxing gloves throughout the fight. When fights are scripted, fighters do weird gestures to signal that they're hurt. It's very possible Mike Tyson was biting on his glove to tell Jake Paul to calm down. Now, if that's not enough proof that this fight was scripted, in the middle of the fight, Mike Tyson is literally talking to Jake Paul while they are clinching.
Now we're talking about Anthony Joshua, and this is a game changer, because we're not looking at some washed up fighter or another carefully chosen opponent. We're dealing with a former two-time heavyweight champion with real credentials, an actual boxer with Olympic gold to his name, with victories over Vladimir Klitschko, one of heavyweight boxing's all-time greats, with a professional resume that Jake Paul could never equal, could never even pretend to have. Joshua wasn't some aging fighter years removed from his prime. And he wasn't some MMA has-been looking for easy money. He was legitimate talent, a genuine world-class boxer, going up against a YouTube personality who'd been playing dress-up in boxing trunks. The betting lines told the story better than any commentary could. We're talking massive international interest, hundreds of millions wagered on the outcome through sportsbooks worldwide, and that's exactly why the fixing allegations became a federal matter, rather than just internet chatter. When actual money moves through gambling, when licensed bookmakers and bettors are risking real cash on a rigged outcome, the spectacle enters federal crime territory, serious criminal ground. It becomes wire fraud. It becomes something the FBI can actually intake and prosecute.
That's definitely a crazy fight because of the weight differences. The weight difference in there, I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. You know, for me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, you know, of the weight difference, and, you know, Joshua's a former, you know, champion, and also, you know, he's active, you know. I mean, this is going to be the first time that we see Paul, you know, fighting an active fighter. You know, I mean, we seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, you know what I'm saying? It's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional, you know. And so
Eddie Hearn, Joshua's well-known promoter who's been around this business for decades, went into damage control mode immediately, and he had to because the accusations weren't fading away like he probably hoped. They were growing, spreading, gaining momentum and credibility. He appeared in interview after interview saying the same thing over and over like some mantra he hoped would make it true. If it was fixed, we'd have FBI investigations, he kept saying. Think about that argument for a second. Really consider it. His defense wasn't that rigging a professional boxing match was impossible, or that the allegation was absurd on its face. His defense literally relied on the threat of federal investigation as proof of innocence, as if federal law existing somehow meant nobody would dare break it. Do you think I'd ever allow AJ to script a fight with Jake? Hearn kept repeating almost desperately, because Hearn is a seasoned promoter who has worked boxing at the highest levels, who understands exactly how this business works, knows that Joshua wasn't supposed to demolish Paul like that, wasn't supposed to embarrass him so completely. The deal, the alleged deal that people were whispering about, was supposed to have Joshua taking control early, making it competitive, but with restrictions, with limitations, with contractual boundaries on how badly he could damage Paul's reputation and earning potential, and then came from Paul himself, the admission that no spin could fix. Right after the fight, bloodied and broken, his face swollen beyond recognition, Paul had to confront the reality he'd been avoiding. His jaw was destroyed, not just bruised from impact, not just scraped from a clean shot, but broken in multiple places, completely shattered really. He required emergency surgery, the kind of medical work you don't need from a fight that went according to plan. The damage was severe, potentially career-ending even, and right there trapped in the ring with cameras rolling and no way to spin the narrative positively, Paul had to tell the truth for maybe the first time in his boxing career. "I got completely destroyed," he mumbled, the words barely audible through his broken jaw, "but I'll come back and keep winning." He tried, attempting to salvage something from the wreckage, but there was nothing left to save, no story angle that could make this look like victory. The Joshua fight wasn't close, wasn't exciting, wasn't even entertaining from a sporting perspective. It was annihilation, a mismatch, a real boxer, showing what happens when manufactured hype meets authentic skill. Joshua took virtually no damage, barely broke a sweat. Meanwhile, Paul absorbed everything, every punch, every ounce of punishment that comes from facing someone who actually belongs in there. And that gap explains everything about what happened in Miami. After December, former professional boxers began breaking down what they'd witnessed. Not just the Joshua beating alone, but Paul's entire boxing journey, seen as one complete narrative. Paulie Malaysia, a top-level boxer who competed at the sport's highest level, who recognizes real boxing, said what everyone was starting to realize. Jake Paul's opponents weren't randomly selected from available fighters. They were hand-picked, carefully chosen specifically. Overweight MMA legends, well past their peaks. Fighters who hadn't competed seriously in years. People who wanted a payday more than a victory. The moment he faced someone his own age, someone with comparable experience, fighting under standard drug testing protocols, without special contractual protections, he couldn't compete, couldn't even survive, really. That loss should have ended it all. The reality check that brought things back to normal. The moment when everybody acknowledged that Jake Paul wasn't a boxer, wasn't an athlete in the traditional sense. He was an entertainer pretending to be one. An influencer with excellent promotional skills and enough money to purchase fake legitimacy. But instead of accepting defeat and moving on, instead of acknowledging the truth and going back to content creation, Paul evolved into something different. He transformed, repositioned himself in boxing's ecosystem. He became more organizer than participant, someone creating events rather than competing in them. And he began producing fights that weren't about sport or athletic accomplishment. They were about spectacle, about narrative control, about controlling the story at all costs, and never letting reality interfere with the brand he'd built.
Discussion, any agreement about, hey, you need to get the fight into this round, you need to carry him for X amount of rounds, you need to do your part to get it into the 5th, 6th, or whatever?
Absolutely no way ever. I mean, if you look at a couple of the right hands that AJ missed with in the first couple of rounds, like, they would have done the same job on Jake's jaw if they would have landed. And Jake did very well to avoid them. So I always said going into the fight, AJ's not the kind of guy that's going to come out like a train, just start swinging away. He's going to take his time, and that's what he did. You know, the fight definitely went a few more rounds than anticipated from Anthony, but it's like, even now, it's like, yeah, it was definitely a fix. Some guy commented today on one of my posts, yeah, it was definitely a fix. I go, you do know that he's broken his jaw in 2 places.
Then came the question that every combat sports fighter eventually faces, but most avoid entirely and even fewer get investigated for. Was Jake Paul natural? Was his physical transformation from hard work and nutrition, or was something else going on? The evidence pointed somewhere else, toward a direction that Paul certainly didn't want explored. Over 6 months preparing for the Tyson fight, Paul added 30 to 40 pounds of what appeared to be solid muscle while maintaining, and here's what defies natural biology, he kept the speed and agility he displayed when he was 30 pounds lighter, maybe even improved it. His trainer Shane Mosley, a boxing Hall of Famer who knows natural development, said Paul gained 20-30 pounds during camp. That's significant mass. Real size that should slow you down while somehow maintaining the movement and quickness of a cruiserweight or someone much lighter and more mobile. That's not how human physiology is under natural conditions. That's not what clean training and diet produce, regardless of genetic advantages. Then the Tommy Fury situation occurred, which raised more questions for observers. Tommy's father, John Fury, who's been around boxing his whole life and knows every angle, claimed Paul wouldn't accept Veda drug testing. That's voluntary, anti-doping agency testing with strict protocols and oversight, with random tests and real consequences. Paul's response was predictably evasive. Dodging the actual issue, he claimed the Fury family was making excuses, searching for ways out, but he never addressed the testing question directly. The optics were terrible, looked suspicious even to casual observers. If Paul was actually clean, if his system was pure, why would he resist stricter testing protocols? Why would he refuse the monitoring that Olympic athletes accept as standard? Why would he choose weaker oversight if he had nothing to hide from stronger scrutiny? When the Joshua fight came around, the conspiracy machine was prepared, already built and running. Online communities dedicated to Jake Paul investigation, to examining his career and finding inconsistencies, had compiled evidence, cross-referenced footage from different bouts, and developed a narrative that seemed more plausible with each new piece. Legitimate boxing analysts, people with credentials and reputations on the line, talked about it openly. Even casual fans who didn't spend hours on forums studying frame-by-frame breakdowns were feeling something off. Something seemed staged. The Tyson script leak didn't create this from thin air. It crystallized it, gave it structure and specifics. It let people say what they'd been thinking privately, what they'd been reluctant to voice, because it sounded too conspiratorial, too crazy to believe. And when Joshua destroyed Paul so completely, so utterly and convincingly, that narrative became reality in millions of minds immediately. Because here was a fighter who wasn't playing along, who wasn't following whatever arrangement may have existed. Here was a professional who treated the fight seriously, who brought his full skill and power and obliterated everything Paul had built, exposed it as the manufactured show it had always been.
People think I do steroids and all this shit, so I have a plan, because I think it's fucking bizarre. That's like the only excuse they can come up with is like rigged fights, Jake Paul does steroids. So after boxing, I'm gonna do a cycle of steroids to show people what
Jake Paul on steroids actually looks like, because I want to shut people the fuck up.
Jake Paul's response to the mounting evidence and public suspicion was textbook legal strategy straight from crisis management playbooks. He hired celebrity attorney Alex Spiro, someone who represents high-profile clients and understands how to weaponize courts for image control. He had most valuable promotions. His company issued cease and desist letters to anyone claiming his fights were scripted or predetermined, trying to silence critics through intimidation, standard bullying tactics. His business partner and MVP co-founder appeared on the Ariel Helwani show to defend their enterprise, and made statements that actually validated the critics if you read between the lines. When people explicitly allege that Jake is putting on fake or fixed fights, that's defamation. The Dorian explained, treating legitimate concerns like personal attacks, that's causing significant damage to his business, his reputation, his revenue stream. He went on clarifying their position, but in doing so revealed how defensive they'd become. The truth is, lots of questionable things happen in boxing. Everyone knows this, but we have never tried anything like that ever. Since MVP launched and Jake Paul's career started, he insisted, we've never discussed anything resembling that, never even entertained the possibility. Frank Warren, Joshua's co-promoter, took a completely different approach, one that was almost worse in its honesty. He didn't tackle the scripting allegations head-on, didn't deny or confirm anything. Instead, he minimized the spectacle, brushed off Paul's previous fights as irrelevant. Fighting a 60-year-old Mike Tyson is vastly different from fighting Anthony Joshua, Warren declared, stating what everybody understood. Translation: reading between the lines, we all knew what we were dealing with here. We all understood Paul isn't a real boxer in any meaningful sense, isn't someone who belongs in a ring with elite competition, but the money was too enormous to resist. The payout was too substantial to let ethics get in the way.
Never once in Jake Paul's career been any talk of that sort, of anything to do with the fight being anything but a real fight that has exactly the same situation as any professional fight. And that's exactly the same thing here for the Anthony Joshua fight. It's just beyond mind-blowing that people would think that. Anthony Joshua was on record saying that if he didn't finish him in the first round, that would be disappointing, that it would be a failure. The narrative changed as we got closer to fight night and obviously post-fight, and I understand why, but they were pretty adamant it would take max 2 rounds to knock out Jake Paul.
Less than 2 weeks after the Joshua demolition of Paul getting exposed on the biggest stage, federal agents raided Jake Paul's Calabasas mansion. In what appeared to be a major investigation, multiple news sources confirmed the search warrants being executed, verified the details independently. Aerial footage showed officers entering the gated community government vehicles and federal teams surrounding the property. Logan Paul, Jake's brother and business partner, who's been involved in every aspect of this operation, allegedly got seriously panicked, completely freaked out, according to witnesses. Official statement from the FBI was intentionally vague, almost mysteriously short criminal activity related to an incident he's known for being publicly associated with. They declared, which says almost nothing while confirming something significant was unfolding. But the timing was clear. Impossible to ignore the raid occurred as rumors circulated through social platforms. Rumors that exploded and went mainstream rapidly. Rumors that Jake and Logan Paul had been arrested while attempting to flee the United States before trying to escape overseas before federal charges could be filed. Because after years of suspicion, after mountains of circumstantial evidence, after the leaked script that proved at least one fight was predetermined after the Joshua demolition, that exposed the entire charade after the pattern of cherry-picked opponents and performance-enhancing drug allegations that never fully went away, the public was prepared to believe that something massive was happening, that the whole fraudulent empire was finally collapsing, that justice was finally coming for the biggest scam in modern boxing history.